Move.
You were clinically dead 9 months ago. Why?
What if the world's deadliest mercenary had to risk everything for one final rescue mission? X-Day Extraction 2 2023 delivers insane action, an unforgettable one-shot sequence, and hidden facts you don't want to miss. Welcome to Sonu Hub. Watch till the end for the full review, ending explained, and amazing movie facts. Extraction 2 is a 2023 American action thriller directed by Sam Hargrave and written by Joe Russo. The movie is based on the graphic novel Ciudad and is the second film in the Extraction series. Chris Hemsworth, Golshifteh Farahani, and Adam Bessa return to play their roles from the first movie. They are joined by Tornike Gogrishiani, Tornike Biziava, Tinatin Dalakishvili, Daniel Bernhardt, Olga Kurilenko, and Idris Elba, who all play important parts in the story. This time, Tyler Rake is hired for another dangerous mission to break the family of a powerful crime boss out of a high-security prison in Georgia. After the huge success of the first Extraction movie, Netflix officially announced a sequel in May 2020. Joe Russo came back to write the script, Sam Hargrave returned as director, and Chris Hemsworth once again took on the role of Tyler Rake. Later that year, Joe Russo and his brother Anthony Russo shared that they wanted the sequel to build the characters even more and possibly turn the franchise into a bigger cinematic universe. Filming was originally planned to begin in Sydney in September 2021, but the COVID-19 pandemic delayed production. The cameras finally started rolling in Prague in November 2021, and filming wrapped up in Vienna in April 2022. Along with the returning cast and filmmakers, composers Henry Jackman and Alex Belcher also came back to create the movie's exciting and intense soundtrack. Extraction 2 premiered on Netflix on June 16, 2023, and received mostly positive reviews from both critics and audiences. Viewers praised its intense action scenes, emotional story, and especially its jaw-dropping stunt sequences. The movie also earned a nomination for Best Stunts Action at the 6th Hollywood Critics Association Mid-Season Film Awards, showing just how impressive and action-packed the film really is. After barely surviving his last mission in Dhaka, Bangladesh, Tyler is pulled out of the river alive and flown to the UAE for emergency medical treatment. Nick stays by his side the whole time. Even though Tyler remains in a coma for a long time, she never gives up on him. Eventually, he wakes up and begins a long, painful recovery. After months of intense physical therapy, Tyler slowly gets his strength and mobility back. 9 months later, Tyler Rake, Chris Hemsworth, retires from mercenary work and stays in a quiet cabin in Austria to recover. Nick and her brother Yaz bring him there, and Nick tells Tyler it's time to focus on rebuilding his life instead of chasing dangerous missions. But his peace doesn't last long. A mysterious man named Alcott Idris Elba shows up with a new mission. He asks Tyler to rescue Ketevan, Tinatin Dalakishvili, the sister of Tyler's ex-wife Mia Olga Kurylenko, along with her two children, Sandro Androja Paridze and Nina Martakovziashvili, from a prison in Georgia. Ketevan is married to David Radiani Tornike Baziava, one of the founders of the Nagazi, the biggest crime syndicate in Georgia. After David murders a DEA agent by throwing him off a bridge, he's sent to prison. Because of pressure from the United States, he can't bribe his way out. To make sure Ketevan never leaves him, David forces her and the kids to live inside the prison with him. The terrible conditions and David's constant abuse push Ketevan to secretly ask Mia for help. Meanwhile, Sandro believes his father is a hero and dreams of growing up to become part of the Nagazi. At the same time, a governor working for the gang tells Zurab, Tornike Gogriciani, David's brother, that David's prison sentence has been extended by another 10 years. Zurab demands that the governor release David, but the governor refuses because he doesn't want trouble with the Americans. Furious, Zurab brutally kills the governor and all of his bodyguards. Alcott explains to Tyler that David and Zurab control a billion-dollar heroin empire based in Georgia. Their gang is extremely loyal, almost like a family, and they have politicians and powerful officials under their control. Once Tyler rescues Ketevan and her children, the entire Nagazi organization will come after him. Knowing what's waiting for him, Tyler begins training hard and pushes his body to prepare for another deadly mission. Tyler brings Nick, Golshifteh Farahani, and Yaz Adam Bessa onto the mission. With help from a corrupt prison guard, they sneak inside the prison, but David quickly alerts the inmates, causing a massive prison riot. During the rescue, David attacks Tyler and Ketevan, forcing Tyler to kill him. Sandro never sees it happen because Tyler sends him and Nina ahead with Nick, while he stays behind to deal with David and the prisoners. Ketevan refuses to leave Tyler and helps him fight through the violent riot. Together they battle hundreds of prisoners across the prison yard before finally reaching the exit. Nick picks them up at the prison gates and they escape just as Zurab and his men arrive. During the chase, Sandro realizes that his father is dead. Tyler's team fights off the attackers and makes it to an armored train waiting for them at an industrial complex. The danger isn't over yet. While escaping on the train, Tyler has to fight off two helicopters sent by Zurab. One group of enemies lands on the train and heads toward the engine to stop it. Nick battles the attackers and keeps the train moving, while Tyler protects Ketevan and her children. With no brakes left, the train crashes off the end of the tracks. Amazingly, everyone survives the wreck. The team boards a plane and escapes to Vienna. But Sandro secretly contacts his uncle Zurab using Yaz's satellite phone during the flight. He tells Zurab exactly where they are. Zurab manipulates Sandro by claiming that Ketevan had been planning to take him away from his father for years, and reminds him that Tyler is the man who killed David later. Ketevan tells Nick that Tyler is actually her former brother-in-law. Nick realizes this mission isn't just another job, it has become deeply personal for Tyler. Sandro confronts Tyler and accuses him of murdering his father. Tyler explains that David kept Ketevan trapped against her will and that she stayed only to protect Sandro and Nina. But Sandro refuses to believe him. Tyler tells the boy that he has to decide whether to trust his mother or continue believing the lies his father told him. Zorab and his men track Tyler's team to their safe house in Vienna's DC towers and launch a brutal attack. Ketevan blames Sandro for putting the whole family in danger because of his blind loyalty to his father. During the chaos, Sandro leaves his mother behind and joins Zorab. Yaz chases after him, hoping to bring him back, but gets separated from Tyler and Nick. Nick goes after Yaz, but her vehicle is hit by a grenade launcher. Tyler rushes to save them, but Zorab's forces trap them inside the building. With no way out, Tyler decides their only chance is to reach a helicopter waiting on the roof. Tyler, Nick, and Yaz fight their way to the top of the building. During the battle, Nick is knocked unconscious and nearly falls off the edge. Tyler grabs her just in time and refuses to let go. Zorab shoots Tyler's hand, but Tyler still holds on to Nick with everything he has. Nick wakes up, shoots at Zorab, and gives Tyler the chance to pull her back to safety. The team escapes in one of Zorab's helicopters, but before they can get away, Zorab fatally wounds. Yes, heartbroken Tyler and Nick retreat to Tyler's cabin, where Mia arrives and reunites with Ketevan. While they're there, Tyler finally opens up to Mia. He apologizes for leaving on a mission before their young son died from cancer. Tyler admits he'll always regret that the last memory his son had of him was watching his father leave. Meanwhile, Aftandil, Dato Bakhtadas, Zorab's uncle and trusted right-hand man, begs him to stop chasing revenge before more people die. He tells Zorab to think about setting a better example for Sandro, but Zorab refuses to listen. Instead, he kills Aftandil and calls Tyler, telling him to meet at a nearby airfield next to a church for one final showdown. Tyler goes alone because he doesn't want Nick risking her life again. He wipes out the remaining Nagazi gunmen and finally confronts Zorab inside the church. Sandro is there too, wearing an explosive vest. Zorab forces Sandro to pick up Tyler's gun and orders him to kill Tyler, but after seeing the truth about his father and uncle, Sandro refuses. At that moment, Nick arrives, safely removes the explosive vest, and Tyler fights Zorab in a brutal final battle. Tyler kills Zorab, but both he and Nick are badly injured just as the police storm the church. After everything is over, Tyler and Nick are arrested and sent to prison. Mia tells Tyler that Ketevan and her children have been placed in protective custody after agreeing to help the American authorities by exposing the Nagazis' criminal operations. However, all of their money has been frozen. Tyler tells Mia about the $1 million he hid under the floorboards of his cabin and asks her to give it to Ketevan and the kids so they can start a new life. Before leaving, Mia tells Tyler something he's always needed to hear. Her son died, believing his father was a hero. Later, Tyler is taken out of prison to meet Alcott once again. Alcott offers him another dangerous mission in exchange for his freedom. Tyler says he won't accept any deal unless Nick is released too. Alcott smiles and reveals that Nick has already been brought along. With both of them finally free and a brand new mission waiting, the movie comes to an exciting end. Casting Chris Hemsworth as Tyler Rickey. Chris Hemsworth returns as Tyler Rickey, the former Australian SASR operator turned Black Ops mercenary whose near-death experience at the end of the first film leaves him physically and emotionally fractured. In Extraction, Rick begins in recovery at a remote Austrian cabin, grappling with the lingering trauma of past failures, including the death of his son and the dissolution of his marriage. The character's arc expands beyond pure action competence to explore vulnerability, guilt, and the possibility of redemption through a mission that carries personal stakes. rescuing the sister of his ex-wife and her children from a Georgian prison controlled by a powerful crime syndicate. Hemsworth, already a global star from his portrayal of Thor across multiple Marvel Cinematic Universe films, brought both physical presence and dramatic range to the role. His prior work in Rush, where he played Formula One driver James Hunt, demonstrated an ability to convey intensity and charisma under pressure, while earlier appearances in The Cabin in the Woods and Snow White and the Huntsman showcased versatility across genres. For Extraction Tie, the physical demands escalated significantly. Hemsworth trained for a leaner, more functional physique rather than the bulk associated with Thor, incorporating boxing, Pilates, functional CrossFit style workouts, and recovery protocols including saunas, ice baths, and physical therapy. Filming required him to perform extended practical stunts, including sequences involving real fire on his arm and action atop a moving train traveling at high speed in snowy conditions with a helicopter in close proximity. Director Sam Hargrave has noted Hemsworth's total commitment, describing him as a collaborative partner willing to push limits while making smart decisions about when stunt doubles were appropriate for safety. Hemsworth also served as a producer, contributing to story development that deepened Rake's backstory. The actor has spoken about the challenge of continuing a character without fully explaining his past in the first film and the opportunity in the sequel to examine the pain and brokenness driving Rake's choices. This layered approach allowed the performance to balance brutal efficiency in combat with quieter moments of reflection and connection, particularly in interactions with returning allies and the family he is tasked with protecting. Golshifteh Farahani as Nick Khan. Golshifteh Farahani reprises her role as Nick Khan, Rekha's trusted handler, partner, and closest confidant. In the first film, Nick operated more from a logistical and strategic position. In Extraction 2, her role expands into fully realized field operations, placing her in the thick of intense combat sequences, including a high-stakes confrontation on a moving train where she engages multiple armored opponents. Nick shares with Rake a history of pain and loss, forming a chosen family bond grounded in loyalty rather than romance. Farahani has emphasized that Nick is not written as a love interest or a figure defined by her relationship to a male character. She is a soldier and a human being processing trauma while remaining operationally lethal. Farahani, an Iranian French actress, first gained international attention for her work in Iranian cinema, including The Pear Tree, which earned her early awards, and later films such as About Ellie and The Patient's Stone. Her Hollywood breakthrough came with Body of Lies, opposite Leonardo DiCaprio, after which political and cultural pressures in Iran restricted her ability to return home. Subsequent roles in Patterson, Girls of the Sun, and the series Invasion further established her range. For Extraction 2, she underwent rigorous physical preparation comparable to professional athletes, training 8 to 9 hours daily in martial arts, kung fu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, boxing, knife fighting, and weapons handling. She also trained with real firearms. Producers have praised her dedication and the humanity she brings to a character who is both formidable and grounded. Nick's expanded presence strengthens the ensemble dynamic. She drives Rake's recovery in the early stages of the story and remains a constant presence through the prison extraction and subsequent confrontations. Her performance underscores themes of chosen family and resilience, providing emotional counterweight to the relentless action while matching the physical intensity of the set pieces. Adam Bessa as Yes Khan. Adam Bessa returns as Yes Khan, Nick's brother, and a core member of the extraction team. Yes balances the ruthlessness required by the profession with a lighter, a more stylish approach to life. He participates fully in the high-risk operations, bringing firepower expertise and operational support, while his personality offers moments of contrast amid the darkness surrounding Rake. And Nick Bessa, a French-Tunisian actor, had previously appeared in the series Hannah and earned critical recognition for Harka, winning the UN Certain Regard Award for Best Performance at the 2022 Cannes Film Festival. His work in Mosul and The Blessed further demonstrated his capacity for intense, grounded performances. In Extraction I, Yaz's role includes significant action involvement and a narrative arc that tests the team's bonds, particularly during the later stages of the mission when the syndicate retaliates. Bessa's portrayal adds texture to the found family dynamic of the mercenary unit, highlighting loyalty under extreme pressure. Tinatin Dalakishvili as Ketevan Radiani. Tinatin Dalakishvili plays Ketevan Radiani, the sister of Rake's ex-wife Mia and the primary extraction target, married to David Radiani, a co-founder of the powerful Georgian crime syndicate known as the Nagazi. Ketevan is forced to live with her two children inside the prison where her husband is incarcerated. The abusive conditions and David's control prompt her to seek help, through Mia setting the central mission in motion. Ketevan is portrayed as resilient and protective of her children, navigating both the physical dangers of the prison break and the psychological complexities of her family ties to the syndicate. Dalakishvili, a Georgian actress and model born in Tbilisi, began her career without formal acting training. Her early credits include Georgian and international productions such as Season Love with an Accent, Star Hostages About Love for Adults Only, opposite John Malkovich, and the lead role in the science fiction film Abigail. She has spoken about the personal significance of portraying a strong Georgian character in a major international production filmed with authentic Georgian talent, noting that it could inspire resilience in her home country. During production of the elaborate prison yard sequence that forms part of the film's extended single-shot action set piece, Dalakishvili sustained a hairline fracture in her lower leg after a fall involving multiple stunt performers. She continued performing through the pain for multiple nights before the injury was fully diagnosed, later working with a prosthetic as needed. Director Sam Hargrave and producers have highlighted her determination and commitment under those conditions. Her performance anchors the emotional stakes of the rescue. Ketevan's interactions with her children, particularly the older son Sandro, whose loyalties become conflicted, add layers of family tension that parallel Reike's own unresolved parental guilt. Andro Japaridze as Sandro Radiani. Andro Japaridze portrays Sandro Radiani, the teenage son of Ketevan and David. Sandro has been influenced by his father's worldview and the Nagazi culture, creating internal conflict once the extraction begins. His decisions later in the story introduce significant complications for the team, testing the boundaries of loyalty and survival. Japaridze, a young Georgian actor with limited prior credits at the time of filming, including a short film titled Andro, brought authenticity to the role of a teenager caught between family allegiance and the reality of the violence surrounding him. The character's arc explores the intergenerational transmission of trauma and ideology within the crime syndicate, providing a younger perspective on the world Reke is attempting to extract the family from. Miriam Kovjashvili and Marta Kovjashvili as Nina Radiani. The young daughter Nina Radiani is played by twin actresses Miriam Kovjashvili and Marta Kovjashvili. Their shared role represents the most vulnerable member of the family unit being rescued. Nina's presence heightens the protective stakes for Ketevon and the extraction team, emphasizing the human cost of the syndicate's control and the necessity of the mission. Tornike Gogrishiani as Zurab Radiani, Nicolos Radiante. Tornike Gogrishiani delivers a commanding performance as Zurab Radiani, the primary antagonist and leader of the Nazi syndicate. Zurab is the older brother of David and co-architect of a vast criminal empire built on heroin and weapons trafficking that exerts near total influence over Georgian politics and institutions. Flashbacks reveal a traumatic childhood marked by civil war displacement, bullying, and harsh paternal demands that shaped both brothers into hardened criminals under the guidance of their uncle Aftandil. Zurab channels suppressed emotion into a rigid, quasi-religious ideology of family and loyalty within the Nagazi, making him a relentless force once Reke kills David during the prison extraction. His pursuit of revenge drives the latter half of the narrative, culminating in large-scale assaults and a personal confrontation. Gogrichiani, born in Kutaisi, Georgia, trained at the Shota Rustaveli Theatre and Film University, he gained recognition for stage work, including a notable turn as Macbeth, and has appeared in Georgian television series such as Artificial Breathing as well as films including Adam and Eve. He has also directed short films. For Extraction 2, he embodies a character described as a tragic figure whose internal repression manifests as external brutality and a belief in the righteousness of his vengeance. The dual credit for Nicolos Radiani reflects additional narrative elements tied to the family's history. Grishiani's performance provides a formidable counterpart to Hemsworth's Reke, grounding the antagonist in cultural and psychological specificity rather than generic villainy. Tornik Ibziava as David Radiani. Tornik Ibziava plays David Radiani, Zurab's brother and Ketevon's abusive husband. Imprisoned after killing a DEA agent and unable to buy his way out under American pressure, David forces his wife and children to live with him inside the prison. His presence inside the facility sets the stage for the extraction's complexity, and his death at Rex's hands during the riot triggers Zurab's full-scale retaliation. Giava, another Georgian actor with credits in films such as Brighton Forth, The President, A Fold in My Blanket, and Keep Smiling, contributes to the authentic regional casting that defines much of the syndicate's portrayal. The brothers' shared history and contrasting yet complementary roles within the Nagazi illustrate the organization's foundation in familial bonds twisted by violence and power. Daniel Bernhardt as Constantine. Daniel Bernhardt appears as Constantine, one of Zurab's key associates and a skilled combatant who engages Rick in intense physical confrontations. Bernhardt, a Swiss actor and martial artist known for action roles in films such as Atomic Blonde, The Matrix Reloaded, and numerous other genre entries, brings credible fight expertise to the supporting antagonist role. His presence elevates the hand-to-hand sequences and reinforces the professional threat level of the Nagazi's enforcers. Idris Elba as Alcott. Idris Elba plays Alcott, initially referred to in some materials as an unnamed stranger or the man in the suit. A smooth and enigmatic operator who approaches Reke at his Austrian cabin with a mission to extract Ketevon and her children. Alcott represents a shadowy employer and reappears at the film's close with another proposition, hinting at larger forces and potential future directions for the franchise. His limited but pivotal screen time establishes the catalyst for the plot, and leaves open questions about his true affiliations. Elba, a British actor of Sierra Leonean and Ghanaian descent, is widely recognized for roles including Stringer Bell in The Wire, Heimdall in the MCU, reuniting him with Hemsworth, Bloodsport in The Suicide Squad, and numerous dramatic and action performances. His casting adds star power and intrigue, with his natural authority and charisma making Alcott a memorable presence despite the restrained role. Producers have indicated interest in expanding the character in potential spin-off or sequel material. Olga Kurilenko as Mia. Olga Kurilenko portrays Mia, Tyler Rake's ex-wife and Ketevan's sister. 8 years after their divorce, Mia initiates contact that leads to Alcott's recruitment of Rake. Their interactions allow Rake to confront residual guilt over abandoning the family while their son was dying of cancer. Mia provides a measure of closure, informing Rake that their son's final memory of him was of a father going off to save people rather than simply walking away. She also facilitates the post-mission arrangements for Ketevan and the children. Korilenko, a Ukrainian-French actress, rose to prominence with roles in Hitman, as Camille Montes in the James Bond film Quantum of Solace, and later appearances in Oblivion: The Death of Stalin, and as Taskmaster in Black Widow. Her performance in Extraction Eye supplies emotional grounding and connects Rex's personal history directly to the central mission, bridging the mercenaries' professional violence with unresolved domestic trauma. Supporting Georgian and ensemble cast, the production prioritized authentic Georgian casting for many of the Nagazi-related roles and family members. Dato Bakhtadze appears as Aftandil, the uncle who guided the young brothers into crime and continues as a senior figure. Levan Saginashvili plays Vakhtang, George Lasha appears as Sergo, and Irakli Kvirikadze is credited as Ivine. These performers, along with others such as Tite Komahidze as a portly guard and various gang members, contribute to the cultural specificity of the Georgian sequences. Young performers Demitr Kavelashvili and Giga Shavadze portray the childhood versions of Zurab and David respectively in flashbacks that illuminate the origins of the syndicate. Additional supporting players include Justin Howell as Geo Patrick Newall, also a producer as Seb, Paul Maynard as a Merck emergency doctor, Hector Andreu as Petrusko, and Matt Laborde as Mikhail. Director Sam Hargrave makes a brief cameo as a ditch digger grave digger. Uncredited and smaller roles fill out the prison Vienna and action environments with a mix of local and international talent. Casting approach and production context. Casting directors Sarah Harley Finn, Krista Huzur, and Georgian casting director Ekam Javanadze assembled a multinational ensemble that balances established international stars with regional authenticity. The decision to cast Georgian actors in the majority of the Nagazi and family roles grounds the story's setting and cultural texture. Returning performers from the first film, Hemsworth, Farahani, and Bessa provide continuity of character and chemistry, while new additions such as Elba, Kurilenko, Dalakishvili, Gogrichiani, and Bernhardt expand the world and raise the dramatic and physical stakes. Physical preparation was extensive across the principal cast. Beyond Hemsworth's regimen and Farahani's martial arts immersion, the action sequences demanded coordination among stunt teams, actors, and the camera department under cinematographer Greg Baldy. The film's signature extended single-take sequences required precise timing and endurance from performers, including those less experienced in large-scale action. Dalakishvili's injury and continued performance illustrate the real physical risks involved. The ensemble's diversity of backgrounds, Australian, Iranian French, Tunisian French, Georgian, British, Ukrainian French, Swiss, mirrors the global scope of the mercenary world and the specific Georgian criminal milieu. Each major performance contributes distinct texture, Hemsworth's wounded intensity, Farahani's loyal competence, Gogrichiani's repressed rage, Dalakishvili's quiet strength, Elba's enigmatic authority, and Kurilenko's measured emotional resolution. Together, they support a narrative that interweaves high concept action set pieces with themes of family, guilt, loyalty, and the possibility of partial redemption. Secondary and tertiary roles further populate the prison environment, the Nagazi's ranks, medical recovery sequences, and the Vienna safe house confrontation. Performers such as Roman Gwensadze, Lasha Ramishvili, and various uncredited actors as gang members, medics, staff, and bystanders create a lived in sense of place. The inclusion of child performers for both the present day Nina and the flashback versions of the Radiani brothers ensures continuity of the intergenerational story. Overall, the casting of Extraction I prioritizes a combination of star power capable of carrying large scale action, regional authenticity for the Georgian storyline, and performers willing and able to meet the extreme physical requirements of Sam Hargrave's practical long take action style. The result is an ensemble that feels cohesive within the film's heightened reality while allowing individual characters room to register distinct personalities and motivations amid the chaos. Production The making of Extraction 2 was, in many ways, a story of patience. A sequel of this scale rarely comes together quickly, and this one was further complicated by a global pandemic, shifting shooting locations, and the sheer physical demands of building on a franchise that had already made its name through punishing technically ambitious stunt work. What began as a straightforward follow-up commission in the spring of 2020 turned into a nearly 3-year odyssey that carried the production from Los Angeles boardrooms to the streets of Prague, the towers of Vienna, and eventually back to editing suites where a small army of technicians stitched together some of the most complex action sequences ever built for a streaming release. Below is a detailed account of how the film came together, broken down by phase, development and pre-production. The origins of Extraction 2 trace back to the almost immediate success of the first Extraction film, which became one of the most watched original releases in Netflix's history upon its 2020 debut. Given numbers like that, a sequel was less a question of if than how soon, and Netflix moved quickly. Within weeks of the first film's release, word emerged that the studio had locked in the key creative team to return for a follow-up. Joe Russo, who had written the original film's screenplay, was brought back to pen the sequel, while Sam Hargrave, the stunt coordinator turned first-time feature director who helmed the original, was confirmed to return behind the camera. Chris Hemsworth, whose portrayal of the battle-scarred mercenary Tyler Rake had become the emotional and physical center of the franchise, was likewise set to reprise his role. This swift turnaround reflected how much confidence Netflix had in the property. The first film had proven that a straightforward, hard-edged action story built around long unbroken takes and a mercenary protagonist with a death wish could resonate globally in a way that transcended language and culture. For Joe Russo and his brother and creative partner Anthony Russo, the sequel represented more than a chance to capitalize on that success. The Russos, whose Hollywood pedigree includes some of the biggest superhero blockbusters of the previous decade, saw in Extraction the seeds of something larger. By the end of 2020, the brothers had spoken publicly about wanting to use the sequel not just as a single follow-up, but as a foundation for an entire shared universe of stories set within the world established by the first film. Their ambition was to deepen the roster of characters introduced in the original: mercenaries, handlers, criminal syndicates, and the shadowy networks that connect them, so that spin offs, prequels, and further sequels could eventually branch outward from a single central mythology. That ambition manifested in more than just talk. Early in the planning stages, rumors surfaced that the Russos were also developing a separate origin story centered on Saju, the character played by Randeep Hooda in the first film, a former Indian intelligence operative who had served as one of the original's most compelling secondary figures. While that particular spin off did not materialize as part of the sequel itself, its existence as a talking point in industry reporting from January 2021 underscores how seriously the creative team was thinking about franchise expansion even before a single frame of the sequel had been shot. It is a pattern familiar from the Russos' prior work on ensemble franchises. Build out a world, methodically populate it with characters strong enough to support their own narratives, and let audience appetite determine which threads get pulled first. Securing Hemsworth's return was, unsurprisingly, central to the sequel's viability. Tyler Rake had become one of the actor's signature roles outside of his long running franchise work as Thor, offering him the chance to play a grittier, more grounded kind of action hero defined by trauma, guilt, and a near suicidal willingness to place himself between danger and the people he is paid to protect. Industry reporting on major film salaries would later reveal that Hemsworth's involvement in the sequel came with a reported fee of $20 million, a figure that placed him among the more highly compensated leading men in the industry at the time, and reflected both his box office draw and the calculated bet Netflix was making on the character's continued popularity. With the key creative pillars in place, the production moved into logistical planning. The original Extraction had been shot with a deliberate emphasis on immersive continuous action choreography, most famously an extended sequence through the streets of a fictionalized version of Dhaka that appeared, through clever editing and camera trickery, to unfold in a single unbroken take. Replicating and ideally surpassing that achievement became a central creative challenge for the sequel from the earliest planning stages. Hargrave, whose career prior to directing had been built entirely around stunt work and second unit action direction, understood better than almost anyone in the industry how such sequences are actually constructed through painstaking rehearsal, specialized rigging, and a production design process that treats every location less as a backdrop and more as a piece of functional stunt architecture. It is worth pausing on just how unusual this level of behind the scenes continuity is within the modern studio system. Sequels to successful action films frequently change directors, sometimes even change lead actors, and often bring in entirely new writing teams tasked with reinventing or reshaping a franchise's tone. The decision to keep Joe Russo, Sam Hargrave, and Chris Hemsworth locked in from the earliest planning stages reflects a philosophy closer to the author driven continuity found in long running franchises helmed by a single creative vision than the more interchangeable, executive driven approach common to many studio tentpoles for Netflix, still relatively early in its push to establish itself as a serious home for theatrical caliber blockbuster filmmaking. Preserving that creative continuity carried obvious strategic value. It signaled to audiences, critics, and the broader industry that the platform was capable of nurturing a genuine franchise property with a consistent creative identity rather than simply commissioning disconnected one-off action films under a shared title. The pre-production period also involved extensive script development work as Joe Russo worked to expand the story beyond the relatively contained single mission structure of the first film, where the original extraction had centered on a single extraction operation in Dhaka. The sequel needed a narrative engine substantial enough to justify a larger budget, an expanded roster of characters, and a broader geographic canvas. The decision to root the sequel's plot in the fictionalized criminal underworld of Georgia, built around a family drama involving Tyler's ex-wife's sister and her children, trapped within an abusive cult-like criminal organization, gave the screenplay both the large-scale action opportunities the franchise required and an emotional core tied directly to Tyler Rake's own ongoing grief over the loss of his son, a thread carried over and deepened from the first film. This blending of hardened genre mechanics with a through line of personal trauma and redemption is characteristic of how the Russos have approached action storytelling throughout their careers, treating spectacle and emotional stakes as mutually reinforcing rather than competing priorities. Casting for the expanded ensemble also took shape during this period. Alongside the returning trio of Chris Hemsworth, Golshifteh Farahani, and Adam Bessa, the production brought in a slate of performers largely drawn from Georgian and broader Eastern European acting talent to portray the Radiani family and the Nagazi crime syndicate at the center of the plot, including Tornike Gogrishiani, Tornike Biziava, and Tinatin Dalakishvili. This casting approach lent the film's antagonist faction a degree of cultural and linguistic specificity that grounded the story's setting, while martial arts and stunt performer Daniel Bernhardt, a veteran of the action genre with decades of prior stunt and fight choreography credits, was brought on in a supporting role well suited to his physical performance background. Olga Korilenko was cast as Mia, Tyler's ex-wife, expanding on a relationship only briefly referenced in the first film, while Idris Elba joined the cast in a small but narratively significant role as the mysterious handler who sets Tyler's mission in motion, a casting choice that generated considerable fan and press interest given Elba's own action genre pedigree and his brief but memorable appearance bookending the film's plot. Initial plans called for filming to begin in Sydney, Australia. In September 2021, Australia held obvious appeal, both because of Hemsworth's ties to the country and because of the production infrastructure and stunt talent pool that had made Sydney an attractive location for large-scale action filmmaking in prior years. However, as with so much of the entertainment industry during that period, the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic disrupted those plans. Border restrictions, quarantine requirements, and the general uncertainty surrounding international travel made an Australian shoot increasingly impractical, and the production ultimately shifted its base of operations to continental Europe, settling on the Czech Republic as its primary filming hub. This relocation was not merely a matter of convenience, it reshaped the visual and geographic texture of the film. Since much of the sequel's plot is set in and around Georgia, the country, and Austria, regions whose Eastern and Central European character meshed naturally with the production facilities and urban landscapes available in and around Prague. The pre-production phase also involved extensive pre-visualization work for the film's most technically demanding sequences, a standard practice for large-scale action productions, but one that carries particular weight for a franchise built around extended, seemingly continuous shots. pre-visualization, essentially a rough digital or animated mock-up of planned sequences created well before principal photography begins, allows directors, stunt coordinators, and cinematographers to map out camera movement, blocking, and the placement of hidden cut points long before expensive sets are built or actors and stunt performers are called to set. For a sequence as logistically complex as the sequel Central Prison Riot Train escape set piece, this kind of advanced planning is not a luxury but a necessity since the sequence spans multiple physical locations, dozens of stunt performers, and specialized rigging that all needed to be coordinated well in advance to ensure the eventual shoot could proceed efficiently within the production's budget and schedule constraints. Location scouting during pre-production also played a significant role in shaping the eventual shift of the production to Central Europe. Once the pandemic ruled out the original Sydney plan, the production team needed to identify locations capable of standing in convincingly for the story's Georgian and Austrian settings, while also offering the soundstage capacity, skilled crew base, and favorable production incentives that would allow a shoot of this scale and technical complexity to proceed efficiently. The Czech Republic's well-established film infrastructure, built up over decades of hosting major international productions, made it a natural fit, offering both the urban and rural texture needed for certain sequences and the studio facilities required for interior sets such as the prison compound and its riot sequence. Filming principal photography on Extraction 2 officially began in Prague, Czech Republic in late November 2021, with director Sam Hargrave confirming the start of shooting to press outlets around November 29 of that year. Chris Hemsworth followed shortly after, announcing that he had begun filming his own scenes in early December. The choice of Prague as a production base was consistent with a broader trend in blockbuster filmmaking, where the city's combination of soundstage capacity, skilled crew base, tax incentives, and visually flexible architecture capable of standing in for a wide range of European settings has made it a magnet for large international productions for years. From Prague, the shoot moved to Vienna, Austria in late January 2022, with that leg of production running from January 28 through February 14. Vienna's contribution to the film is far from incidental. Several pivotal sequences in the finished movie take place in and around the DC Towers, a real and distinctive pair of skyscrapers located in the Donau city district of the Austrian capital. The production made use of the area surrounding these towers for what would become some of the film's most visually striking and structurally demanding set pieces, leveraging the modern glass and steel geometry of Donau City to create a sense of vertical multi-level danger that differentiated these sequences from the more horizontal street-level chaos of the first film's signature chase. The Vienna sequences in particular required close coordination with local authorities and building management, given that the DC towers remain functioning commercial and residential structures rather than a purpose-built film set. Staging large-scale stunt work, including helicopter sequences, gunfire, and hand-to-hand combat in and around an active urban environment requires careful choreography not just of the performers but of the surrounding public space, road closures, permits, and safety perimeters, all coordinated with municipal authorities to minimize disruption to the daily life of the district while still allowing the production the freedom to capture the scale of action the script demanded. The decision to use a real architecturally distinctive location rather than a built set or a digitally created environment reflects the franchise's broader commitment to grounded physical filmmaking, lending the sequence a tangible sense of place that would have been far harder to replicate convincingly through purely digital means. Filming officially wrapped on April 6, 2022, closing out a shoot that had spanned several months and two countries, on top of the pandemic related delays that had already pushed the start date back from its original 2021 target. Throughout the shoot, the production maintained the technical approach that had defined the visual identity of the first film. Extensive use of RR Alexei Mini LF cameras, a lightweight, large format digital cinema camera system well suited to the kind of mobile operate carried shooting required for extended long take sequences. This camera choice was not a coincidental holdover. It was a deliberate continuation of the same long take strategy the filmmakers had pioneered on the first extraction, in which sequences are built to appear as single, unbroken shots, even though they are in practice assembled from multiple takes joined together through a combination of careful blocking, hidden cuts, and digital stitching. This technique deserves some elaboration because it is arguably the single most defining formal characteristic of the Extraction franchise. The owner or single continuous take has a long history in cinema, stretching back through decades of films that have used unbroken camera movement to heighten tension, immerse audiences in real time action, and eliminate the psychological distance that editing cuts can sometimes introduce. What Hargrave and his stunt and camera teams did with the first extraction and pushed further with the sequel was adapt that technique specifically to hand combat, vehicular chases, and firefights, disciplines that are far harder to choreograph in extended unbroken shots than a simple walk and talk conversation scene. Achieving this effect requires camera operators who are themselves trained in stunt work, since the camera must move through gunfire, hand to hand combat, and vehicle interiors alongside the performers, often mounted on rigs, gimbals, or the operator's own bodies, transitioning fluidly between handheld drone assisted and vehicle mounted shots without ever appearing to cut. For the sequel, the production reportedly aimed to top the celebrated set piece from the original film, and the finished movie delivers an extended sequence that unfolds across multiple environments: a prison compound, a raging riot, an armored train, and finally an airborne escape, all rendered with the same illusion of continuity. Achieving this required not just skilled camera operators, but a production design team capable of building interconnected sets and locations that could accommodate the physical logistics of a sustained action sequence, including hidden cut points where practical effects, invisible camera handoffs, or digital compositing could bridge what were in reality separate film segments. The physical demands of the Prague and Vienna shoots should not be understated. Filming through the winter months in Central Europe meant contending with cold temperatures, shorter daylight hours, and the general logistical strain of coordinating large stunt teams, camera rigs, and practical effects equipment in outdoor conditions. Chris Hemsworth himself acknowledged the harshness of the shooting conditions in comments made to press during the Prague leg of production, noting the physically taxing nature of performing extended action choreography in cold weather over long shooting days. This kind of first hand commentary from a lead actor offered informally to journalists on set rather than through official studio channels is often one of the more revealing windows into the day-to-day reality of blockbuster production. underscoring that even with the resources of a major streaming platform behind it, physical filmmaking of this kind remains a grueling, unglamorous endeavor for cast and crew alike. The production design challenges of the prison sequence, which occupies a substantial portion of the film's first act and forms the launching point for its signature long take sequence, required building out a functional multi-level set capable of housing a large-scale riot sequence, complete with practical fire effects, choreographed group combat involving dozens of background performers, and the mechanical requirements of staging an escape onto a moving armored train. Coordinating a sequence of this scale demands weeks of rehearsal well before cameras roll, with stunt coordinators blocking out precise choreography for both principal cast members and the larger ensemble of stunt performers portraying rioting prisoners and pursuing guards, ensuring that every element of the sequence, from individual hand-to-hand exchanges to the broader group movement through the riot, can be captured cleanly by camera operators moving through the space in real time beyond the marquee long take sequence. The shoot also required extensive stunt coordination for the film's more conventional but still demanding set pieces, including hand-to-hand confrontations, vehicular mayhem, and a climactic confrontation involving an explosive vest, all of which needed to be blocked, rehearsed, and filmed with an eye toward audience safety as much as visual spectacle. Given Hargrave's own background as a stunt performer and coordinator prior to becoming a director, he worked extensively in the stunt departments of large studio productions. The on-set approach to physical action was informed by an insider's understanding of what stunt performers can safely execute and how best to capture their work on camera without diluting its impact through excessive cutting. This insider knowledge manifested in tangible ways throughout the shoot, including an emphasis on extensive rehearsal periods before any given action sequence was committed to film. Unlike dialogue scenes, which can often be adjusted through multiple takes with relatively low physical risk, action sequences involving weapons and close quarters combat carry inherent safety considerations that make extensive pre-shoot rehearsal essential. Stunt performers, camera operators, and principal cast members would typically run through choreography repeatedly on set or in dedicated rehearsal spaces before cameras rolled, refining timing, spacing, and camera positioning until the sequence could be executed safely and repeatedly enough to allow for the multiple takes typically required to assemble a convincing long take illusion in post-production. This rehearsal-heavy approach, standard practice within the stunt industry, but often invisible to audiences who only see the polished final result, represents a significant, if largely uncredited, investment of time and resource during the production schedule, and it stands as one of the less visible but most essential contributors to the franchise's reputation for delivering some of the more technically impressive action filmmaking in contemporary blockbuster cinema. Following the conclusion of principal photography in April 2022, the production returned to reshoots in November of that same year, once again based in Prague. Reshoots are a standard part of blockbuster filmmaking, frequently used to address pacing issues identified in early cuts, to add connective narrative material, or to refine action beats that did not land as intended during the initial edit. Chris Hemsworth was photographed wrapping this additional round of filming in mid-November 2022, greeting fans near Prague Castle as the reshoot period concluded. A small but telling detail, suggesting that even the supplementary shooting carried some public visibility and anticipation, a sign of how closely the sequel's production was being tracked by fans and local press alike in the cities where it filmed. Post-production on a film built so heavily around extended, seemingly unbroken action sequences is in some ways where the real magic of the Extraction franchise takes shape. While the on-set choreography and camera operation lay the groundwork, the editorial and visual effects teams bear enormous responsibility for selling the illusion of continuity that defines the film's signature set pieces. Editors must work with footage assembled from numerous separate takes, weaving them together at moments where a passing vehicle, a doorway, a swirl of smoke, or a digital stitch can mask the transition from one film segment to the next. The goal is to preserve the sense of forward momentum and real-time urgency that makes these sequences so visceral, while never letting the audience perceive the underlying editorial themes. Visual effects work supplemented this practical in-camera approach rather than replacing it, a philosophy consistent with the franchise's overall commitment to grounded, physically credible action. Where digital tools came into play, they were generally used to erase rigging, extend environments, remove safety equipment, or blend certain transition points within the long take sequences, rather than to generate large-scale digital spectacle of the kind seen in more fantastical blockbusters. This restraint is part of what critics and audiences alike came to associate with the franchise's identity. Even when the stakes escalate to riots, armored trains, and rooftop firefights, the action retains a tactile, weighty quality that distinguishes it from more heavily digital contemporary action cinema. The post-production period also encompassed sound design and mixing, disciplines that carry outsized importance in a film built around sustained dialogue light action. Gunfire, explosions, vehicle collisions, and hand-to-hand combat all needed to be mixed with a level of clarity and impact that could sustain audience engagement across sequences, lasting many minutes without cutting away, while dialogue moments needed to remain intelligible and emotionally resonant amid the surrounding chaos. This balancing act, ensuring that quieter character beats land with the same care as the film's louder, more kinetic sequences, is part of what allows the franchise to maintain an emotional through line even as it delivers on its promise of relentless action. The editorial process for the film's central long take sequence carried the particular significance given how directly the sequence's success would shape critical reception of the film as a whole. Editors and visual effects supervisors worked through numerous passes of the sequence, refining the placement of hidden cut points and ensuring that the transitions between the prison, the riot, the armored train, and the eventual airborne escape flowed with enough visual and rhythmic consistency to sustain the illusion of a single continuous shot across what amounts to a substantial portion of the film's runtime. This kind of extended post-production refinement is common for signature action sequences in blockbuster filmmaking generally, but it carries added weight for a franchise whose critical and audience reputation is so closely tied to the technical execution of exactly this kind of sequence. Any visible seam or awkward transition risks undermining the very achievement the sequence is designed to showcase. Color grading and overall visual tone were also calibrated during post-production to distinguish the sequel's various settings from one another, lending the Georgian prison sequences a harsher, more desaturated palette suited to the story's grim opening stakes, while the Vienna set sequences around the DC towers received a cooler, more urban, reflective visual treatment befitting the film's shift toward a modern European cityscape. This kind of tonal differentiation through color work helps orient audiences geographically and emotionally as the story moves between settings, reinforcing narrative shifts through visual language, even within a film that otherwise maintains a fairly consistent, grounded aesthetic throughout. Music scoring duties for Extraction 2 were handled by Henry Jackman, working alongside Alex Belcher, both of whom returned from the first film to continue building out the sonic identity of the franchise. Jackman is a composer whose filmography spans a wide range of large-scale studio productions, and his work on the Extraction franchise reflects an approach tailored to the specific emotional and tonal needs of Tyler Rake's story. A score capable of driving pulse-pounding action sequences while also carrying the more introspective, grief-laden moments that define the character's arc, particularly his ongoing trauma over the loss of his son. The decision to bring back the same composing team for the sequel was consistent with the franchise's broader strategy of continuity across its key creative positions. Just as Hargrave's return as director and Joe Russo's return as writer ensured stylistic and narrative consistency, Jackman and Belcher's return on scoring duties allowed the sequel's music to build directly on the thematic material established in the first film, reinforcing recurring musical motifs associated with Tyler Rake while introducing new material to underscore the expanded scope of the sequel's setting and stakes. A score for a film like this must walk a difficult line. It needs to intensify the tension of extended action sequences without becoming a distraction from the sound design of gunfire and physical combat, while also providing enough emotional weight during quieter scenes, such as Tyler's reckoning with his ex-wife Mia over the death of their son, to ensure the film's more dramatic elements do not feel like an afterthought wedged between action beats. The film's official credits list Henry Jackman and Alex Belcher as the composing team, confirmed through industry trade reporting in the weeks leading up to the film's release, further cementing the sense of creative continuity that ran through nearly every major department of the production, from direction and screenwriting to lead casting and music. Jackman's broader body of work, spanning large-scale studio productions across multiple genres, has established him as a composer particularly adept at blending orchestral scale with more contemporary percussive and electronic textures, an approach well suited to the kind of modern, globally set action thriller that the Extraction franchise represents. Rather than leaning entirely into a traditional sweeping orchestral idiom, the score for Extraction 2 draws on a hybrid sonic palette, combining orchestral instrumentation with pulsing electronic elements and percussion forward passages designed to heighten the visceral, propulsive energy of the film's action sequences without ever slipping into bombast for its own sake. This kind of hybrid scoring approach has become increasingly common in contemporary action filmmaking more broadly, reflecting a general industry shift away from the purely orchestral scores that dominated the genre in earlier decades toward a sound palette that can sit more naturally alongside modern sound design and can shift fluidly between intimate character moments and large-scale action without requiring a jarring change in overall sonic identity. Because so much of the film's runtime is dedicated to sustained action sequences with minimal dialogue, the score also carries significant responsibility for guiding audience emotional response during those stretches, signaling shifts in stakes, momentary victories, and mounting danger through musical cues in the absence of explanatory dialogue. This places considerable pressure on the composing team to craft cues flexible enough to accompany extended action passages that may run many minutes without a clear scene break, a very different compositional challenge than scoring a more conventionally structured film built around shorter, discrete scenes separated by cuts. Released theatrical unlike traditional studio blockbusters, Extraction 2 was produced and distributed as a Netflix original film, meaning its release strategy diverged significantly from the conventional theatrical rollout that most major action films of comparable scale and budget would typically receive. Rather than a wide theatrical release designed to maximize box office receipts over an extended run, Netflix opted for a limited theatrical presence paired with a same day global streaming debut, a distribution model the company has used consistently for its highest profile original films since the mid 2010s. As part of this approach, Netflix hosted a premiere event in New York City on June 12, 2023, bringing together members of the cast for a red carpet style gathering ahead of the film's wider public availability. This kind of premiere event, while modest compared to the multi city global press tours associated with traditional studio tentpoles, nonetheless served an important promotional function, generating media coverage, red carpet photography, and cast interviews in the days immediately preceding the film's release, helping build anticipation among both press and general audiences. Following the New York premiere, Extraction 2 was made available to Netflix subscribers worldwide on June 16, 2023. This global simultaneous streaming release stood in contrast to the staggered international rollouts common in traditional theatrical distribution, where a film might open in North America weeks or months before reaching other territories. For Netflix, whose business model depends on driving subscriber engagement across a global user base rather than maximizing per territory box office receipts, a unified worldwide release date makes far more strategic sense, allowing the company to generate a single coordinated marketing push and to measure viewership data across all markets on a consistent timeline from day one. The absence of a conventional wide theatrical release does not mean the film had no theatrical footprint whatsoever. Limited theatrical screenings, often tied to award qualification strategies, festival placements, or special promotional events, are sometimes arranged around Netflix's major releases. However, for a film squarely aimed at the action thriller demographic rather than award season prestige categories, the theatrical component of Extraction 2's release was always secondary to its streaming debut. Consistent with how Netflix has handled the release of other high profile action and genre films in its library, the marketing campaign surrounding the release leaned heavily on the franchise's signature action identity, with trailers and promotional materials emphasizing the scale and intensity of the film's stunt work, prominently featuring glimpses of the extended long take sequence that critics would later single out as the film's central achievement. This marketing approach mirrored the promotional strategy used for the first film, which similarly foregrounded its own single shot action sequence as a key selling point, suggesting that Netflix and the filmmaking team recognized early on that the franchise's technical action pedigree, rather than its narrative or dramatic elements, represented its strongest hook for attracting the widest possible global audience. Given that Netflix's business model rewards broad, immediate engagement across a diverse international subscriber base, rather than the kind of sustained critical buzz that might drive a platform specific awards campaign. This action forward marketing emphasis made clear strategic sense, aligning the film's promotional identity closely with the aspects of its production, extended stunt choreography, single take camera work, and large scale set pieces that had already proven most commercially and critically resonant with the first installment, Home Media, because Extraction 2 was conceived, financed, and distributed as a Netflix original rather than a traditional studio theatrical release. Its home media presence differs substantially from what audiences might expect from a film distributed by a traditional major studio. Rather than following the conventional pattern of a theatrical run, followed months later by a home video window encompassing physical media releases such as Blu ray or 4K UHD discs and premium video on demand rental windows. Extraction 2's primary and, for practical purposes, only home viewing option at release was the Netflix streaming platform itself. This distribution model reflects the broader shift in how major streaming services have restructured the traditional theatrical to home media pipeline. For a conventional studio release, the home media window exists specifically to capture revenue from audiences who did not see the film theatrically, whether through disc sales, digital purchases, or rental transactions. Netflix's model collapses that entire pipeline into a single event. The moment a film like Extraction 2 becomes available for streaming is, for the overwhelming majority of its audience, also the moment it becomes available for home viewing. There is no meaningful delay between release and home media availability in the traditional sense, since the film's core distribution channel from day one is a subscription based home streaming service accessible on televisions, computers, tablets, and mobile devices around the world. This does not mean physical media releases are entirely absent from Netflix's approach to its highest profile original films. The company has, on occasion, worked with partners to produce limited physical media runs for collectors, particularly for films with especially strong critical reception or cultural cachet, sometimes years after their original streaming debut. However, such releases tend to be secondary, niche offerings rather than a central part of the film's overall distribution and revenue strategy, which remains anchored almost entirely around subscriber engagement metrics, total hours viewed, unique accounts reached, and how a given title performs relative to Netflix's broader slate of original content during its debut weeks. In the case of Extraction 2, Netflix's own internal viewership metrics, along with third party estimates, offer the clearest picture of how the film performed in its home streaming environment during its release window, a topic explored in more detail in the box office and reception discussion below. Since for a Netflix original, viewership data effectively functions as the closest equivalent to traditional box office reporting. This absence of a conventional home media rollout also has implications for how audiences engage with a film over the long term. Traditional home media releases, particularly physical disc formats, tend to keep older films circulating in secondary markets for years, whether through retail sales, rental services, or resale, while also providing dedicated collector's editions featuring supplementary content such as behind the scenes documentaries, commentary tracks, and deleted scenes. Netflix originals, by contrast, remain primarily accessible only for as long as the platform chooses to keep them in its active library, subject to licensing negotiations, catalog management decisions, and the platform's own internal calculations about which older titles continue to justify their place in an ever expanding content library. This structural difference means that a film's long-term cultural footprint and continued discoverability depend far more heavily on a streaming platform's internal curation choices than would be the case for a film with an established physical media presence, a dynamic that has generated ongoing discussion within the film industry and among film preservation advocates regarding the long-term accessibility of major streaming exclusive releases. A reception box office measuring the commercial performance of a Netflix original film like Extraction 2 requires a different set of tools than those used to evaluate a traditional theatrical release. Because the film bypassed a conventional wide theatrical rollout in favor of a global streaming debut, there is no meaningful domestic or international box office gross to report in the way one would discuss ticket sales for a film distributed by a traditional studio. Instead, the film's commercial success is best understood through streaming viewership data, a metric category that Netflix itself only selectively discloses, often supplemented by independent research firms that track viewing patterns through their own proprietary methodologies. According to estimates reported by the trade publication Media Play News and sourced from Plum Research, a firm that tracks streaming viewership independent of the platforms themselves, Extraction 2 drew approximately 5.3 million unique viewers and accumulated roughly 8.5 million hours watched worldwide during the week spanning June 26 to July 2, 2023. It's worth noting that this particular window falls roughly 10 days after the film's June 16 release date, meaning the reported figures reflect a snapshot of ongoing viewership momentum rather than the film's opening week performance specifically, a distinction that matters when trying to contextualize how the film's viewership trajectory compared to other high-profile Netflix originals released around the same period. The reliance on third-party estimates rather than official studio reported figures is itself a notable feature of how streaming era box office performance gets discussed and reported. Traditional theatrical releases benefit from standardized, independently verifiable box office tracking systems that have existed for decades, providing granular data on opening weekends, week-over-week grosses, and eventual lifetime totals across every major market in the world. Streaming films, by contrast, exist largely within a data ecosystem controlled by the platforms that distribute them, with Netflix historically disclosing viewership figures on its own schedule and according to its own preferred metrics, a practice that has drawn periodic criticism from industry analysts and journalists seeking more standardized, independently verifiable measures of streaming success. Firms like Plum Research have emerged partly in response to this gap, using methodologies such as tracking data usage patterns or survey-based sampling to estimate viewership independent of what platforms choose to disclose. Though such estimates inevitably carry a wider margin of uncertainty than the box office tracking systems used for theatrical releases, despite the absence of traditional box office figures, the available viewership data suggests that Extraction 2 performed as a solidly successful entry within Netflix's original film slate, consistent with the strong brand recognition established by the first film and the significant marketing push that accompanied the sequel's release, including the New York premiere event and the broader promotional campaign built around returning cast members and the franchise's signature action sequences. It is also useful to consider how a sequel's viewership performance is typically interpreted relative to its predecessor within the streaming business model. Because the first extraction had already established itself as one of the most watched original films in Netflix's history at the time of its release, expectations for the sequel were inevitably calibrated against that benchmark. A viewership figure in the millions of unique accounts during a single tracked week, even one occurring somewhat after the immediate release window, generally signals sustained rather than merely opening weekend interest, suggesting that the film continued to attract new viewers and generate word of mouth engagement well beyond its initial debut. For Netflix, this kind of sustained engagement curve, rather than a single explosive opening followed by a steep decline, is often considered a particularly favorable outcome, since it reflects the title's ability to continue driving subscriber engagement and, by extension, platform retention over an extended period rather than functioning as a one-time promotional spike. The general reception of the sequel's commercial performance within press coverage at the time was consistent with this interpretation, with outlets covering the streaming industry generally characterizing the film's viewership trajectory as evidence of a successful sequel launch, reinforcing Netflix's own confidence in the franchise as an ongoing investment, a confidence that would be made explicit within days of the film's release through the announcement of a third installment. Critical Response Extraction 2 received a notably positive critical reception overall, particularly when measured against many action sequels, a genre category that frequently struggles to match or exceed the critical standing of its predecessor. On the review aggregation website Rotten Tomatoes, the film held an approval rating of 80% based on 138 critics' reviews, with an average score of 6.7 out of 10 at the time the aggregate was recorded. The site's consensus summary characterized the sequel as bigger and bolder than the original film, describing it as an effective, over-the-top action thriller that in some respects surpassed its predecessor. This kind of consensus framing, positioning a sequel as an escalation of scale and spectacle relative to its predecessor while still delivering on genre expectations, is a common through line in how critics evaluate action sequels that succeed on their own terms rather than attempting to reinvent the franchise's fundamental identity. On Metacritic, which aggregates critic reviews using a weighted average system designed to account for differences in review length, publication prominence, and critical tone, Extraction 2 received a score of 57 out of 100 based on 29 critics. A result the site's own categorization system classifies as mixed or average reviews. This notable gap between the largely positive Rotten Tomatoes figure and the more middling Metacritic score is not unusual for genre films, particularly action-oriented blockbusters, which often receive more favorable treatment from outlets and critics who evaluate films primarily on their success within genre conventions, versus a comparatively cooler reception from critics whose evaluative frameworks weigh narrative complexity, thematic depth, or formal innovation more heavily. The divergence between these two aggregation systems offers a useful reminder that no single numerical score can fully capture the range of critical opinion a film generates, and that the methodology behind each aggregator, Rotten Tomatoes binary fresh or rotten classification system versus Metacritic's more granular weighted numerical scoring, can produce meaningfully different overall impressions of the same body of critical work.